And we are back with another video, and this one's going to be pretty short. Remember, this week we are meeting in the upstairs computer lab because we are working on research for your literature review assignment. So you should be finding those 3 sources and kind of getting, at least at this point, a general idea of what they say. And you should be doing that anyways because you need to skim over them and see what they say to figure out if it's even a source that you possibly want to use. So that's the main focus, but we're doing a couple of little lessons at the beginning just to continue talking about the literature review assignment and that kind of stuff. So today we're going to be talking about how to use your sources to write your thesis statement, because you will be turning in a thesis statement and the works cited page to me by next Friday, not tomorrow Friday, the 12th, so a week from tomorrow, I guess. So announcements, make sure that you're doing your weekly quiz. That is live now. It's ready to go. It's covering everything from this week. Continue working on that research. If you're having trouble finding sources that you want, you can contact me. You can contact the library. The librarians, the people that work in the library, are going to know more than I will about how to find stuff. So they may be your best bet. So you could go ahead and do that. But if you're having trouble, make sure you're not waiting till the last minute. That's why I'm asking you to turn in your thesis statement and works cited page next Friday, because I want to make sure that everyone has found all their sources and they're not waiting till the last minute, because I'm doing this assignment with you. I'm writing a paper just because I feel like this particular assignment is a little confusing. And so I think that having an actual example that you can look at and go, okay, this is what we're looking for here. This is what I should be writing about. Will be helpful. And so I'll give you an example works cited page and thesis statement as well for next week, so you can look at it and see what we're looking for. But I get I'm trying to do the research for myself, and I'm having trouble because it's like I find stuff that kind of works, or maybe there's just like a paragraph in a whole book, and I'm like, I don't really want to use just a paragraph out of a whole book, that kind of stuff. So I'm feeling the struggle as well, trying to find the sources. So you definitely don't want to wait till the last minute. I worked on it for like 2 or 3 hours yesterday trying to find stuff, and I found a bunch of sources, but I've got to go back and look through and see which ones are actually going to work and that kind of stuff. So make sure that you are working on that you get that. You should have all your 3 sources at least by the end of the weekend, so you can start working on your thesis statement and paper and things like that. Next week, just as a note, we will be back to meeting in the regular classroom. In the past, sometimes students will think that we've just moved the class upstairs, and it's just for this week. So make sure next week that you are back in pane 103. So you are looking at sources, and when you find sources that you want to use, make sure you know where and how you found the source and the information you need for your works cited page and your in-text citations. I talked about last video about how important those in-text citations are, and we're going to practice those probably in class next week just to make sure that we've got that understanding, because I do not want to get any papers that are missing those in-text citations. But once you're looking for your sources, you need to make sure to make a note of where you found it or how you found it. In other words, like maybe what you searched or whatever for the source to find it. Because I know with Galileo, it did this to me yesterday. It will lock you out. Like if you don't use it for, a certain amount of time, when you go to click on stuff, it somehow assigned you out. And I had looked back and there was a couple of things that I really wanted, and I clicked on them, and it just lost its mind and had signed me out. And so I had to go back. I couldn't remember what I'd searched, and I had to go back and spend another hour trying to find those same things so I could actually click on them. So make sure you note, where you find it. I usually just at least write down the title and the author or something, just so I can search specifically for that again. Or like I said, what you search to find that particular list of sources, because you're going to need to find those for, you can't use something in your paper that, quotes or paraphrases or anything like that if you don't know the citation, if you don't know where the quote came from. So it's important to keep track of that. If at all possible, you could send it to yourself. That's what I was doing with it. For the most part, I could, if it was just a full PDF, I was emailing it to myself. There's a place that you can put it in your Google Drive, or you can print it. I don't know how much a printing budget you have. Saving trees and sending it to myself is usually what I do. And that way you don't have to go back and try and find it again later. So make sure that you've got it some way. With the PDFs, it would just send me the whole PDF. It was attached to the email, so all I had to do was open it from the email. I didn't even have to go back into Galileo. So that's something that's pretty good to do. Note also how you're going to use the source. So like which of your main points that it's going to support, or how it's going to be important to your argument. So like how are the different sources that you're finding, how are they supporting your part of the argument when you get to the research paper where you're actually answering your question. Because remember, literature review, we are reviewing the literature, the sources. We are not answering your question yet. But these sources that you're finding for this paper should be sources that you're probably going to use for your actual paper. So make sure that you are finding stuff that's actually viable that you could use. Okay, so taking notes over your sources. These are the things that you should note every time that you find a source that you want to use, especially for this literature review assignment, because this is what you're going to be arguing. Is what argument is the writer trying to make? You're telling me in this particular paper, that's what you're telling me, is that each source, what the argument is, what's their point of view, how are they doing it, what evidence are they using to make their argument, and how does that compare and contrast with each other. So what's the writer's point of view? How does the author make his or her argument? How does the writer's argument and point of view speak to your thesis statement or argument? So when you take it to your research paper, your research argument, you are going to think about how does that particular argument support, or is it a counter argument to the point you're trying to make in your research paper. So the first three are really things that you should be focusing on for your literature review, because these are the things that you're going to answer in the paper about each one of your sources. So you need to definitely make a note. If you print out a source, you can highlight it. I think you can do that on PDFs too, or you can, put notes in the PDF, or you can highlight parts and different things. And maybe you want to use like different colors, like they have the pink and the orange and the yellow over here, that the argument could be pink and then the evidence could be orange, or just something to help you. It helps me find stuff better when I do that. So that may be something that you can do, so you don't have to go back and look through an entire article again. You already have it marked out, so you can summarize it pretty quickly for your paper. And then we also were reviewing a little bit about thesis statements, because again, you're going to be turning in a thesis statement to me next Friday. So this is a little bit of a review that we'll go over again quickly. Remember, a thesis statement needs to be arguable. It has to have a point of view. It can't just be a fact or something like that. It has to be something that people argue against. And this is especially important when you're working on your research argument, your final paper. It needs to be something that's very arguable, and it should be supportable as well. In other words, what you're doing right now, you're finding research that will support your point of view. So you have to be able to find statistics and facts and different reasons and examples and different things like that the evidence you're going to use to support your point of view. And it must be specific enough. So the thesis statement must be precise enough to allow for coherent argument and remain focused on the topic. So that's what we worked on when you were doing your topic essay, was focusing down your topic and making it more manageable for a shorter paper. Because I know 7 pages seems like a lot, but that's a short research paper. The research papers I've written recently have been more like 12 and 15, and then my master's thesis was 87. So 7 pages is not too bad. So just make sure that you've got something that you can cover thoroughly within those 7 pages. So your research paper thesis. So remember, this is the format for when you get to your research paper, or really a paper in general, that it should be in this format. So it should be claim, because, reasons. Now the claim is going to be your argument. So this is the same thing as your argument. When you get to your research paper, it's going to be, this is the answer to your question, pretty much. Because, and then the reasons that you're going to explain. So, when you get to the researched argument, that's what you're going to be answering your question, because your reasons why this argument is viable. And we're going to talk more about that as we get into that paper. But when you think about the thesis statement for your literature review, remember this assignment's about arguing what your sources say, what arguments they're trying to make, and how they make their arguments, and how they compare and contrast with each other. So just for an example, it could be the three sources agree that blah, 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 but they disagree about blah, blah, blah. So it could be they agree on one particular part or point on your topic, but they disagree about another point on it. It's really going to depend on the sources you find and the and what the different sources say. And again, I'm going to give you an example of this. I'm finding sources so I can write this paper. So next week, I'm going to give you an example of this. So you'll see exactly what I'm looking for. But this is an example that is kind of generic that maybe you can kind of fit into what you're going to. You're arguing about their writing, what they're trying to write, what they're trying to argue, what they're trying to say. So remember, stay focused on what the sources say, not the topic, but what the sources say. And when writing your thesis statement, don't just tell me your subject. I can tell by your intro what your subject is. I need an argument. Don't make an unreasonable or outrageous claim. Don't make anything that's a claim that's offensive to people, that kind of thing. Don't say something that you're not going to be able to prove. Don't present an obvious fact or a statement that nobody disagrees with. Remember, your thesis statement has to be arguable. It has to be something that people have different points of view on. Abraham Lincoln was born in whenever he was born. Like that's just a fact. That's not an argument. Make a statement that is too broad. Again, you have 7 pages, and I know that seems like a lot, but to cover that whole argument and to get all the different points that you need to do and cover all those sources, that's going to be, some people can't even do it in that 7 pages. So make sure that it's focused enough that it's something you can cover in a shorter amount of time. And then once you get your thesis, and we'll work on this again, like I said, as we go along some more, revising it. So pinpointing and replacing all non-specific words like people, everything, society, or life. Tell me exactly which people you're talking about. And I can't imagine you can say everything. Like, okay, you can't make an argument about everything. Usually if you have an argument, you can't use the word every, all, or never, or none, because there's probably going to be some exceptions in there. So if you're using those words, then that may be considered an outrageous claim that you can't really support. Which society, which group of people, things like that. Make sure that you're being very specific about it. Clarify ideas that need explanation by asking yourself questions that narrow your thesis. So like who, what, when, where, why, like can you make this thesis more specific? Make sure you replace any linking verbs with action verbs. You want to write an active voice all the time. In other words, the subject of the sentence is doing the action. It's not having action done to it. And we're going to use some examples of that. We're going to look at that in class. Make sure you omit any general claims that are hard to support. Make sure that your thesis is specific as possible and that it's something that you can support with your research. So that's all we were going to cover today. Make sure you found your 3 sources and so that you can, that was very loud. I was trying to prevent that noise from happening. Make sure that you found your 3 sources by next week so that you can turn in your literature review thesis statement and works cited page to me. I'll give you an example of that for next week, but I want to make sure that you found your sources and that you have a general idea of what you are saying. And this is mostly to prevent you from waiting until the last minute, because this one is a hard one to wait till the last minute. It can be very confusing when you start working on it. So I want to make sure that everyone is giving themselves plenty of time. Review those PowerPoints from the lessons so far this semester. That does not include the ones for the articles we read. You don't have to remember what the articles that we read, all what they say, but just stuff from the book, about writing and that kind of stuff. That's going to be your midterm extra credit quiz. It's next week. It's probably going to be live from like Monday to Friday, and you can earn up to 5 extra points on your overall midterm grade and 5 extra points on your literature review. So that's something that you don't have to do it. It's extra credit. So it's not something that's required, but it's something that's a good opportunity. It'll be like 10 questions. It's not going to be anything super long. That you will be able to use that opportunity to possibly get some extra points on some different places. And remember to do your quiz so that you get points for that. Midterms are next week, and then midterm grades are coming out the week after that. So you will have an update as far as how well you're doing via that. And as always, if you have any questions, make sure that you let me know. I am here to answer them. Goodbye.